You know ID in the town all day. ID in the SEA. You know ID in the town all day. ID in the SEA.
Hello and welcome to episode 386 of the fabulous Peltoncast, sponsored by our friends at Pagliacci Pizza. I'm your co-host, Kevin Pelton.
And I'm Tristan Carcino.
And we are coming to you from back in Renton, Washington.
There we go.
Home of the Super Bowl 48 champion,
From back
Seattle
in
Seahawks.
Renton. All right. Number 86, I really...
Are you making me open up the
I'm
spreadsheet
definitely
here?
every week you should just know that you're going to open the spreadsheet because I could not come up with a good 86.
I have a suspicion that Zach Miller is the only 86 listed on this.
Yeah, that's why I couldn't come up with a good 86. No offense to Zach Miller, but it was a short-lived tenure.
Not necessarily the most memorable tenure.
I believe
certainly.
that is Super Bowl champion Zach Miller to you, sir.
That's fair.
He was.
That is
I
very
think he was at the
10th anniversary celebration.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh yeah. He was definitely one of the people where I was like, oh, he was on the team. Huh.
News to me.
Yeah, I remember him.
All right, well, we have recorded a podcast since last week's episode number 385. That being our emergency pod. I don't think we've ever had so many, the listener, demand an emergency pod as we did after UW beat Oregon. I don't know if I mentioned that on that podcast.
And we delivered with like 15 minutes of just basically being like,
15 solid. I think that's what the people wanted, though, is the listener Zach Whitman. Third Pelton brother Zach Whitman pointed out on Twitter. You'll listen to that. You go right back to that moment of post-game euphoria and joy.
Did he say that?
He did say that.
Oh, that's great to hear.
I retweeted it. Way to pay attention to our Twitter account and our mentions.
I only look at the suggested page. I don't look at the following. It's just tweets of Elon Musk for some reason.
Well, we're not following anyone, so if you log into the Peltoncast, you're not getting anything.
We'll talk more about that. We have to talk more about that game.
Obviously. Yeah.
I literally, it's like all
do you want
I
to do it
talk
now?
about.
Or save it for the UW section?
They've
got the hammer.
Section. Oh, they've had the hammer again?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice job, Seahawks. Scoring the fucking red zone.
It would be difficult for the Seahawks to take back
They
the
couldn't
hammer
have done
at this point.
There's nothing they could do.
Yeah, I mean, what? Were they going to... There's no rival for the Seahawks that it's as meaningful as Oregon.
Thanksgiving Day, there will be the stakes that we were talking about, national TV, Thanksgiving Day against the Niners. It's still a pretty deep hatred.
Sure. I think the Niners would need to be coached by Jim Harbaugh for
Brock
it to even have a
Purdy
chance.
is the Bo Nix of the NFL. Honestly, that and then the Niners. So we had that. Seahawks lose, right? The Niners losing on the last second field goal the next day. It definitely was like...
Not the next day.
The next day after the Huskies.
Yeah, I thought you meant after the Seahawks game.
It was a little bit of like, okay, this is still a good football weekend. It's like, whatever happened to the Seahawks, I don't care. Both of these teams, the two teams that are the most hateable, right? I have plenty of hate in my heart for the LA Rams, but it's not like the 49ers hate, right? And so them losing, looking pretty bad in that game, the day after the Oregon loss, in shockingly similar fashion, even though they were going to win the game with that field goal, right?
That is correct.
That was a much bigger swing. So it was pretty nice.
All right, well, let's get into it, starting with this week's Fresh Hop Beer from our friends at Russian River Brewing. It is their Hop Growers Tribute Series with CLS Farms from Yakima Valley, the fresh hop region of Washington. Excited to announce the upcoming release of our Hop Growers Tribute Series featuring CLS Farms. Well, we have previously showcased our beloved hop growing partners in mini brews. This is the first time we brewed enough to keg and bottle for distribution as well. CLS Farms is owned and operated by fifth-generation hop growers Eric and Shelley Desmarais, pictured here on Instagram. We'll link that in the post note with I don't know who the me is in this. Me and Vinny during last year's harvest. This beer is brewed with CLS Eldorado, Chinook, Comet, and Zappa hops. And this is fresh. This was bottled on October 1st.
Wow, that's really fresh.
We begin this week's toast naturally with Michael Penix Jr.
Oh, not Midwestern pizza. Okay.
Oh no, we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
You said naturally, and I heard toasts. I knew that there was Midwestern pizza.
First off,
coming.
there's nothing natural about Provolone cheese.
Well, you don't even know that.
Yes, I do. It can't be called cheese. It legally can't be called cheese. It's
I gotta
processed
try that cheese.
product.
This is like everything people say. I'm just like, I need this cheese more and more.
Everything you hear about how awful it is, you're like, oh man. Michael Penix Jr. named Davey O'Brien National Quarterback of the Week. Somehow was not Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Week.
Who was Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Week?
Eric Ayominor? Is that the name of the Stanford wide receiver?
Oh, I
He
mean,
did have a pretty
that game,
awesome game.
Honestly, like we talked about this. Obviously, Penix had the big moment. Penix had a great game, but like,
No, it wasn't anywhere close to his best game of the season. It was by far his worst completion percentage.
that's what I'm saying. It was a great game over. Like, I don't want to criticize the game that Michael Penix
Obviously
had,
not.
but for being the quarterback of the week
Alec
nationally,
Ayominor is the Stanford wide receiver.
it kind of makes sense to me. Like that, the game that he had, Alec Ayominor, was the best college football game that he will ever have in his entire life.
Without
Michael
question.
Penix, it might be the best stakes, everything else, performance on the field.
Might be the best moment.
Maybe if you were adjusting it, right? Maybe if they had quick reads for college football, maybe it would look a little bit better because that Oregon defense is good. But it's impressive that Michael Penix can be the national quarterback of the week in a week that he did not play necessarily that amazing.
It is quite remarkable. All right, next up, congrats to OL Reign for clinching a playoff spot with a win on Sunday's NWSL Decision Day, moving up to the 4th seed, ensuring a final home match for Megan Rapinoe at Lumen Field this Friday. More to come on that one. We're saying a farewell this week
Pouring one out.
to Two Beers Brewing.
Literally.
Well, we should eventually pour out a Two Beers when they're ceasing operations, which now
Well, I mean, those, they might appreciate in value now. Should hang on to those.
which announced it will end production in December. Sister business Seattle Cider Company will continue operating out of the Woods space in Soto, which is a cool spot, certainly. So a bummer. Two Beers, we had their fresh hop IPA earlier in fresh hop season and at the start of it, because traditionally they are always the first to get their fresh hop beer to market that I see. So
Kind of an institution. I was a little surprised by this one.
yeah. I mean, I don't know what this says about the state of the brewing industry. We previously saw Optimism Brewing close their production and sell that space to Stoop Brewing, I believe it was earlier this year. So it seems like a bit of a contraction, a retrenchment in the brewing market as people turn to other non-beer alcoholic drinks of choice, I guess. Interesting. We'll keep an eye on that.
If this was Como News, there'd be like a 10-part series.
The death of Seattle's breweries.
This death. Yeah.
Seattle's breweries are dying.
Yeah.
Oh, kudos to Climate Pledge Arena, which announced Monday it's become the first arena ever certified as zero carbon by the International Living Future Institute after, among other criteria, managing to eliminate all fossil fuels from the venue, operate on 100% renewable energy, and track, measure, and offset all carbon emitted from the building. So, look, it's easy to be cynical about the Climate Pledge and Climate Pledge's arena's name, but they legitimately are doing it in terms of being, good stewards for the environment.
No one wants to drink anymore. Why would you go out and drink if the government will just pay you to sit at home and drink for free?
Okay, well, that brings us to a much more fun topic.
They'll find a way to tie it to homelessness in Seattle as well. People didn't want to go to Two Beers because they were afraid because of how terrifying the city of Seattle is.
Which is, how many the Iowa listener are there?
There's more? They're multiplying?
So Nathan Holmes is the Iowa listener who has
Okay.
emailed us previously. He after last week's discussion about whether there is Iowa-style pizza, when you wondering whether every Midwestern area has its own style of pizza, emailed to say, we don't have unique or good pizza.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
But we-
appreciate the update. I actually appreciate the people of Iowa for not just feeling like they needed to claim a pizza.
Agreed. There's no Seattle-style pizza, although I guess it would probably have cream cheese on it now that I thought of it. Pagliacci is Seattle-style pizza in St. Louis.
Honestly, I respect Iowa for it.
But we also got an email from Sanjay Chapuri, who said, as requested, the Iowa listener here, not the same person who wrote it earlier, so there are at least two of us.
I didn't know we had more than 2 listeners.
I'm definitely envisioning the device. There are dozens of us. GIF here. To weigh in on ambiguous Midwestern pizza, I'm entering my 5th year living in Iowa City and have never come across specifically Iowa-style pizza, so you're safe this week. Furthermore, I went to college in a small town in Minnesota and have been visiting the Twin Cities regularly my whole life since my dad's family lives there and have never heard of Minnesota-style
Thank
pizza.
you. Who is this?
Either.
Sanjay.
Chipori.
Sanjay Chapuri. Thank you, Sanjay, for speaking truth to power to the people of Minneapolis.
So I'm not sure what the place advertising Minnesota pizza says it is. The only thing I noticed about pizza in Minnesota, much more so than in Iowa, is that it is significantly more likely to be cut into squares, much to my dismay, which that is the tavern style aspect, which we
Yes.
did hear about with Minnesota style pizza. We also, I think, heard that maybe too many toppings for the thin cracker crust.
Yeah, we talked about it, the whole Mall of America thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love the pod. Thanks for putting it out, the Iowa listener. And Sanjay also sent along, I was in Baltimore for work this summer and figured while I was emailing you, I'd show you my visit to a Peltoncast holy site at Camden Yards. It is, we'll have to post this, a photo, a plaque denoting where Sam Haggerty's home run landed
What?
at Camden Yards.
That is incredible.
I don't know why
They have
this is a
plaques
thing.
for like balls that go out of the park or something?
I guess so. It was only 399 feet, so. But I guess if you time that right in right field, perhaps that's sufficient.
I love that they do it for opposing teams also.
Yeah.
Sam Haggerty has one. Like, honestly,
I assumed it was going to be the B&O warehouse in Griffey's home run. I don't know if
Yeah.
that still exists.
oh my God. I'm so excited about this. Think about all the things that you can do in life, right? Like Sam Haggerty, when you're on, so many people play baseball, right? Thousands of people have played professional baseball, even more when you expand that to minor leagues, to semi-pro, all sorts of different places. We saw the fish stick spanners when we were there at game day, right?
We did.
There's so many different places to play professional baseball. Thousands of people have a baseball reference page or whatever. This might be the most special achievement of Sam Haggerty's entire career. This is a real physical, tangible thing in the city of Baltimore honoring Sam Haggerty. That is incredible.
Yeah. So I didn't do any research on that. We may have to do some research on.
Wow. I'm going to Baltimore in December.
Yeah, go check it out.
I'll be there.
We also got this email from Duncan Winter who says, "Hey guys, I was born in White Center and grew up on
There we go.
Vashon. I spent my early years taking Metro from Fauntleroy to the Kingdom to watch Harold Reynolds. Even though I moved to the Bay Area almost 20 years ago, every summer I drive my family up to Seattle to visit my family and make sure they get a firm dosage of taco time,
There we
dicks,
go.
and ferry boats.
Wow.
Anyways, love the podcast, and it really helps me feel connected to a place I still consider home. Sign me up for the live show when the Sonics come back."
There we go. Wait, that'd actually be kind of fun.
That would be kind of fun. I agree.
White. I mean, that's like, I assume age range is probably about the same. Growing up in White Center or being born in White Center and growing up in Vashon, I would describe him as having basically our exact same childhood. Like there couldn't be
No, we don't.
any more
we missed
of
out on the
the
Harold Reynolds Mariners era because
I guess
we did
maybe
not
he's a
pay
little bit
attention to
older.
the Mariners. I mean, maybe not because I was 11. Like I certainly could have watched Harold Reynolds in '93 when we started paying attention to baseball.
We know Damon goes way back with the Mariners. He proved that to us on Saturday.
I did. Yes, I claimed there were no Mariners fans before 1995, and he
Yeah.
took umbrage.
Yeah.
Umbrage.
He didn't just take umbrage. He showed you what was what.
He started referencing Phil Bradley and various other '80s Mariners.
Various other mustachioed Mariners. But I do like it when there's people. It's like how we find the exact target audience, which is people who
yeah.
had our precise childhood.
There are a shocking number of them in Iowa, apparently.
Did any of the people in Iowa say that they had our exact childhood?
No,
Are
they did not
Are
say
they
that.
from the southwest part of Seattle?
I don't think they have said that. They never reference anything about going to Sons of Italy picnics in Maple Valley.
Who referenced that?
Well, that's the Sally brothers.
The Sally brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, our last email this week.
Oh, wow.
Which also takes us into a Mariners
Oh,
segment.
God. Are you kidding me? I
Zach-
see the title of this email and I'm already angry.
Zach Jabal emails us, third Pelton brother. "Here I am defending the Mariners again.
What?
I can't believe I'm doing this again. I totally understand the fan outrage at Dipoto's comments, but I do think the general conversation about the Mariners and their free agent spending or lack thereof tends to ignore the fact that this isn't like buying an item at a store. You have to actively reach an agreement with a player, and the Mariners have two major obstacles that go beyond ownership's willingness or not to spend. Number one, T-Mobile Park is one of the worst parks for hitters in baseball, and in particular is brutal on balls in play due to the dreaded marine layer and similar effects, relatively small dimensions, and general uniformity of the outfield walls. Perhaps because of that, it's also one of the most strikeout-friendly parks in baseball. Free agent hitters have been wary of signing in Seattle ever since the park opened, and for good reason. Number two, the Mariners travel more than any other team in baseball and are also physically the furthest team from many of the hotbeds of baseball talent from the Southeast U.S. to the Caribbean to South America. Again, these are deterrents for some free agents, to be sure. All this means to sign free agent position players, the Mariners frequently would have to not just match the next highest offer, but often supersede it as they did for Robinson Cano, and the stakes for that kind of move are very high. It's easy in hindsight to say that the Mariners should have signed Marcus Semien, but the other free agents who they were linked to in the 2022 offseason, Javi Baez, Chris Bryant, Trevor Story, have all been one shade or disaster or another. Beyond that, there's an incredibly annoying habit that many have of totally glossing over the fact that the team gave a $115 million contract to Robbie Ray that offseason.
The Robbie Ray contract is like the most retcon in Mariners history.
Yes. For reference, that's a bigger free agent deal than anyone but the Astros, or anyone the Astros, Braves, Diamondbacks, Orioles, Marlins, Brewers, or Rays have signed, just among playoff teams. Yes, Ray has been just okay when healthy, and sure, it's not the contracts that the Rangers or Phillies have handed out, but they also finished all of 2 games behind those two teams in the standings and had a better run differential than Philadelphia. This isn't to say that the Mariners don't have real needs this offseason, that they shouldn't spend money to improve the team, but I think the easiest thing for fans to do is point at the free agents the team didn't sign, conveniently ignoring the ones who have stunk, and say if they had him, they'd be in the playoffs. So,
I know. I hate that I agree with this email.
One thing I didn't realize, I just kind of assumed when they moved the fences in that they had made it so, like, it was a pitcher's park, but not like a dramatic pitcher's park.
Yeah.
But then I went and looked it up, and the MLB stats website has park factors for the last 3 years. Like, number one in strikeouts, last in overall impact on offense.
Why
like,
do you
it is
think
the biggest pitcher's park in baseball.
Why do you think strikeouts is a factor here?
That's a fascinating one. I mean,
Do you think it's partially the Mariners pitching staff during that time?
well,
period?
no, because you would account for that. It's
adjusted.
Yeah, it's the difference in what we observe in your home games and your road games. So, I mean, I think the sight lines may be an issue there. I don't know. I mean, it deserves further study. Also, if you feel like you're not going to be as successful putting the ball in play, and therefore you're swinging for more for power at T-Mobile Park, that can lead to more strikeouts. I don't know. It's a fascinating one, though.
So this is, statistically speaking, over the last handful of seasons, the biggest pitcher's park in all of baseball.
The last 3 seasons. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Didn't seem to affect the Rangers, of course, or the Astros.
I mean, actually, it did at times.
It was a 0-0 tie into the 18th inning against the Astros.
Famously not many runs scored in that one. I guess it's third in strikeout effect. Trop, number 1, American Family Field in Milwaukee, number 2, then T-Mobile Park. But if you go overall park factor, Mariners number 31 because they're also ranking behind London Stadium.
Oh, there we go.
Which is a very hitter's park.
The thing that I agreed the most with, out of all the things, because I do think it's a very clear-headed email, right?
Oh.
You can't really deny that. It's a little bit less than your particular defense of the Mariners. There are different ways to go out and get players more than just spending, right? Spending is a useful way to do it, but I do think when you spend more money, it is easier to get a higher degree of talent throughout the organization. There's something about having players, like even when the Mariners traded all the players.
Well, did we talk about this in the pod when you made the argument about like why don't the Mariners just go out and like spend all the money on coaches and things like that? And I'm like, yeah, it turns out actually the Dodgers already thought of that one. But not that it seems to be helping them in the playoffs lately.
Whatever. The Dodgers are fine. I think Dodgers fans, while frustrated with playoff performance, have also seen a lot of winning baseball. They're not talking about 54% with the Dodgers right now. But
I also think the 54% thing has been a little misconstrued because the point of winning 54% of your games over a 10-year stretch is not that you win 54% every single season. It's that inevitably there are going to be some better and worse seasons in that. And when you win more than 54% of your games, you have a pretty good chance of making the World Series and winning it.
Sure. fine. The issue is just when you say that your target is to be slightly above average, that's not a very inspiring thing to say.
I think there was a better way for Jerry Dipoto to message that.
And also, it's the chuckle is the worst part. But what I'm saying, when the Mariners had a pretty solid roster, right? This was 2018. They came close to making the playoffs. Then they tore everything down, right? Yeah. And they ended up with a bunch of talent back in terms of minor league players, things like that, right? That's where a lot of this generation of Mariners players came from.
Yeah.
Was from that teardown, which they did a good job at, right? Like Jerry Dipoto deserves credit for that tear because he was the GM at the time, right?
Yeah.
He deserves credit for that teardown and rebuild after, which did not take that long, all things considered.
Definitely did
If
not.
we would have cared about the Mariners then, we could have expected to just now be at the point of like, okay, this team should be competitive by 2024 or whatever. They were competitive ahead of
I
schedule.
think you probably, it's classically a 5-year plan. You probably would have said 2023. This would probably have been the year.
But now they've had 3 years in a row of competitive baseball.
And even in 2020, they weren't that bad, obviously taking advantage of the shortened season. So they really only had one awful season.
The difference is when you have a lot of major league talent, you can use that major league talent to go out and get other major league talent. So having and spending is generally the way that happens. If you spend on something, I don't know exactly who the Mets got for Scherzer at the deadline or whatever, but they're getting interesting prospects back. Spending is still valuable in a lot of different ways. I don't think it has to be like a franchise where you sign one player and then all of a sudden you're just like, that's it, we are done. It could be a thing where you're spending consistently every single offseason, getting major league talent, turning that major league talent eventually into other major league talent, which the Mariners are generally pretty okay at and have done a fairly good job at it. So I think
except for last offseason.
It's just some general
Although
consistency.
I guess they did do that. I mean, that's to me the thing is like everyone's so focused on free agency, and I agree with Jerry Dipoto and what Zach's argument that like it probably doesn't make sense for the Mariners to target hitters in free agency for all of those reasons. But you can do what they did last offseason where you trade, Eric Swanson from a position of depth for Teoscar Hernandez because Teoscar Hernandez was more expensive going into his last arbitration year. So that's not free agency, but it was leveraging spending to improve the roster.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it was probably the best move of the entire offseason as well.
well, there wasn't like a lot of competition for that. I mean, they did a nice job finding some guys in the bullpen, I guess, Gabe Spire and Taylor Sasado and etc. Justin Topa. But certainly with the offensive moves, I don't know what the number 2 of the offseason move was.
So I think
Cooper Hummel, because he just wasn't. He was solid in AAA.
Cooper Hummel didn't demand roster spot.
He didn't have negative WAR.
He was there. But I do think that's one of the bigger issues. But the other piece that about basically free agency is a two-way street. And I think that's a conversation that literally Jerry Dipoto can talk about, the front office can talk about, and be like, hey, we are in on all these conversations. Sometimes players need X amount more to come to Seattle, and we are not able to spend that dollar amount for that player. Or like, we tried for Trey Turner. He wanted to be in Philadelphia. There are different ways to frame it rather than we're not trying. This is what they are expressing, whether it
rather
is
than we're doing you a favor.
Yes. What they're expressing is not competing. And that, again, we've talked about this. That is what the Mariners or the Seahawks are so good at, is saying we are competing in every situation. And the Mariners do not tell us
that people think that they are like the only team that actually, like, anytime, a free agent a veteran gets released or is
but
on the
they've
trade
done
market.
it. That's why people think that. People aren't like, oh, the Mariners are going to go sign big name free agent or whatever. People learn over time the habits of a team. And
the Mariners' habit is to acquire as many Italian players as possible.
That's the only good habit the Mariners have. But there are certain things that, like young pitching, right? There are things that kind of continually happen throughout an organization. And over generations, even different, like front office staffs and ownerships, things kind of continually happen. The Mariners as an organization are generally pretty good at developing young pitching talent. And that is something that they have done consistently that clearly they care about doing, but we need to be able to leverage that young pitching talent for MLB hitting at this point. This is the offseason.
I hear what you're saying. Trade Logan Gilbert for a star hitter.
I mean, that's it. But that if they do that, if there is a star hitter, fans don't care where they came from. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's not like
I think they care a
you
little
can
bit.
look at the free agent crop, and I also think that the shots that you're taking, the like $8 to $15 million shots that are not like what Jerry Dipoto is talking about setting a franchise back players.
Yeah.
If you hit on a couple of those, it is a huge deal for that season. And I think the Mariners have been nobody could have reasonably been like, I think Colton Wong was a fair risk,
Yes.
but
We were on board with it.
But nobody could have reasonably said to themselves, yeah, Tommy LaStella, that could work out. It would be very hard to find a scenario where that one was going to work out and have him be a competitive major league player.
I think there
for the
was
entire
a scenario, but there's a reason he was available at the minimum.
Yes. And so if you're taking a bunch of shots in the like 8 to 15 million range, the Mariners should have that money, right? If it's an extra $30, $45 million onto the payroll with what they have right now, it doesn't tie you up for multiple years after, and you could possibly have the shot of one of those players. It's not a huge expense. It's not a long-term deal. If one of those players becomes Cody Bellinger or whatever, all of a sudden you are a much more competitive team. So I think that's the place that the Mariners haven't. It is at the top. They have not hitting-wise. They did sign Robbie Ray, and we do forget about the Robbie Ray signing, partially because he was done for the year, partially because he wasn't necessarily that good in his post-Cy Young season. But like the Mariners did go
But none
out
of those
and
are
sign.
arguments to spend more money in free agency.
Well, I mean, this offseason, he's going to be the big free agent signing. So
No, we did not talk about that last week. But one of the things they did is pour some cold water on how quickly Robbie Ray might be back.
Even better. They're like, he can't be framed as the big offseason signing from this offseason because he's not coming back.
Yes.
Good
but
news.
He might be the trade deadline.
There we go. They're just extending it. Yeah, good news. Robbie Ray can't be framed as the offseason free agent signing for the Mariners because he's not going to be back. Anyway, those are all the things. It doesn't necessarily, and I think that's to Zach's point of like, if it's Shohei, if it's Trey Turner, if it's Marcus Semien, those types of players, and you do only remember the hits. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Like, obviously, those ones seem much more prominent.
Availability heuristic.
But they haven't done a good job at almost any level of it.
I mean, they've done a decent job at some levels of it. It's not like they have the world's worst offense. So
No, they don't have the world's worst offense. And they have found players eventually. Like
they just did a really awful job last offseason.
Yes, recently. Like the J.P. Crawford trade, picking up J.P. I think J.P. Crawford's probably one of the most underrated players in baseball. Julio was great. They got a good season out of Ty France. Like they have done good things. Cal Raleigh. Like the Mariners have done some good things on offense, but they need to do more good things because you need a lot of hitters in baseball because all of a sudden that lineup can get pretty bleak pretty quickly with one injury, with 7 players also.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of bleak, the start for the Seattle Kraken has been pretty bleak. They got their first point Saturday at St. Louis in their third game, losing a shootout, but then lost their home opener on Tuesday night to the Colorado Avalanche 4-1, have now scored just 3 goals through 4 games, the NHL's lowest average thus far. It's really they've basically it's basically the gambler's theory where we knew that the Kraken were going to regress to the mean in terms of their shooting percentage that we saw last season, which was at historic levels. Instead, they've gone all the way to the other extreme where they are now struggling to convert goals,
It's
convert
kind of
their
like,
shots at historic
honestly,
levels.
it's kind of like the Mariners, right?
A little bit. But, if every game basically for the Mariners, it was the Mariners in 1-run games and extra inning games, but it's everything for the Kraken thus far. So they still have not gotten a point this season from Matty Beniers through the first 4 games. I think he only had 1, maybe 2 stretches of 4 games without a point last season. And against Colorado, who is 3-0 thus far this season after losing to the Kraken in the first round of last year's playoffs, they did the things that should lead to goals well. They had 38 shots to 28 for Colorado and just could not put anything home. So we'll see to what degree that regresses to the main. They continue this homestand Thursday against Carolina, Saturday against New York. They will do so without Brandon Tanev, who's out 4 to 6 weeks with a lower body injury suffered in the season opener at Vegas. Also, watching the Kraken got substantially more difficult right before the beginning of their season when Xfinity told customers in an email on the day of the opener, which was not on Root Sports, that they were moving the channel, which also broadcasts Blazers games and is majority owned by the Mariners, to their ultimate tier, reducing the price of basic cable subscriptions, but forcing fans to pay $18.50 a month to upgrade to that tier, which also already included Red Zone, NFL Network, NBA TV, MLB Network.
Oh, so I already have this
in the
because
package.
of Red Zone.
Yes.
Okay. I was like, I feel like I've been watching that.
Right. So, to a degree, this, like if you're a diehard sports fan, this probably shouldn't necessarily affect you, but it's obviously indicative of the ongoing, issue of rights fees for RSNs and, the desire of cable companies to cut costs because of cord cutters and all of that, and what an issue that has been. I suppose, like, your thing has always been about the Mariners, like how great it is that they own their own broadcast network and own the Kraken rights, and now it's a little like, are we sure that's such a great thing to have? But
I think broadcast rights are still valuable.
it does give you more flexibility if you have your own rights rather than being dependent on a RSN that's owned elsewhere. Because, if for some reason this deal with, Comcast becomes untenable, the Mariners could go the direction that we've seen teams in the NBA go this season, where they are now putting games back on local over-the-air TV, old school style, and then streaming them themselves through their websites. The Utah Jazz and Phoenix Suns are doing that
Really?
in the NBA this season.
And for free or
No, it's a paid subscription.
for the stream?
Yeah.
Do they have an app or anything like that?
The technical details of this I don't know.
Has the NBA, so there's like a league pass streaming overall, right?
But that's out of market. So these are for in-market games.
Okay. I wonder how long do you feel like there'll be a differential between those two things? Or will it come where a league sells, like say the NBA is
Well,
just
we
like-
already saw it with MLS. That's
MLS,
what
yeah.
they did with their Apple TV deal. I don't think at the level of, the top 3 or top 4 leagues that we're likely to see that, because of the fact that there are certain markets where those rights are so valuable, like the Lakers deal. We'll see, if that eventually goes away, but like the Lakers make massive amounts off of their local TV deal. They're not going to allow the league to just share that around, equally with the Charlotte Hornets.
And if it goes there, then it becomes an equal share.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. We'll see what direction that heads in. I mean, like, I think the piece that you're talking about, you said it's the Jazz and who?
Suns.
And the Suns. So they're on whatever, for us, it's the equivalent of like King 5 or something like that.
I mean, a little lesser, but it's like back when the Sonics were on Kong.
And it's every game.
When the Mariners were on KSTW.
Every single game.
I believe so. All non-national games, yeah.
I do think that there is a value in that for people who are just like there's still people out there who don't have like the complete cable package or whatever, who are just like, I just have whatever, And I do think being on those channels makes the games a little bit more accessible to people in your area, where it's like the streaming piece makes them less accessible to random average fan, right? Who's out there.
Yeah, that's why I think you want to marry those two options.
No, I think it's actually kind of genius
Yeah.
because there is a marketing piece to it, especially if you're good, right? Which the Suns at the very least are.
Yeah.
If you're a good team,
The Jazz are not good, but they are very locally popular still.
having a very, very easy way for people to watch it. I always compare it to like songs on the radio, right? Like people have this argument where it's like streaming is the only place that people listen to music. And in reality, if you get a song on the radio, it is the biggest deal in the entire fucking world, right? Because those songs being on the radio to get just random person. Streaming is still it's semi-passive, but if you can go and just like Jan all of a sudden is aware of your music, like that is when you have reached a new level. Because it's streaming is passive, but it's still like an opt-in passive. You know what I mean? Like you still have to be there and be like, I am a person who's going to Spotify and listening to music, or I like this general type of music.
Or even
something.
like, I tend to not listen to a lot of like random curated by other Spotify playlists. So I'm mostly listening to music I already like when I'm on Spotify. So the random discovery, yes, is when I happen to be listening to the radio
Yeah.
or I'm at the pool in Vegas.
No, it's a huge deal, and I do think it's the same for the marketing and all of the other pieces. There's still an important value to being locally popular, I guess is what I'm saying, and the local accessibility. You have to be good also, but like if the Mariners were not on, obviously the Mariners are a different situation because they own the network, but if the Mariners were just on network TV, I think they would be that much more popular locally.
So on the Blazers aspect of this, Sean Hyken of Rose Garden Report reported that the Blazers' contract with Root Sports runs through 2024-25 with a team option for 2025-26, and notably includes language requiring their games to be available to a certain percentage of households. So we'll see whether this Comcast move changes, whether they meet that criteria.
And this was also about Comcast trying to lower the like base value for whatever cable tier.
Which I think is part of what this was like. The Comcast sent the email and they did we're doing you a favor because of the fact that they reduced the price
Thanks,
of
Jerry.
the basic subscription.
They saw that press conference and they were like, we're actually doing you a favor by not winning too hard.
I feel like that should be our new
Just
bit.
want to let you know. We're not going to win too much. We're doing you a favor. We are going to raise ticket prices, though, significantly.
The
We're
Peltoncast
doing you a favor.
the Peltoncast should incorporate "We're doing you a favor"
Yeah.
as a bit. When we record for an hour and 45 minutes, we're doing you
We're
a
doing
favor.
you a favor.
All right, let's talk about the Sounders, who are off an international break. Big win for USMNT on Tuesday night.
Oh, yeah. Really handled Ghana.
Decision day in MLS is coming up. It's Saturday. I thought it was Sunday all along because that's where they've done it in the past, but apparently they decided not to go up against the NFL this year. Saturday at St. Louis SC. We'll see whether they sample any St. Louis style
There we
pizza
go.
on this trip.
As
Much to play
far
for.
as we've heard, it would be a very bad thing if they did.
Much to play for against the St. Louis City squad that has clinched the top spot in the Western Conference, but could still affect home field advantage if St. Louis hosts the MLS Cup against certain East opponents. This is the first trip to STL for the Sounders. A win would guarantee the Sounders a top 3 seed, give them a chance to move up to second if LAFC does not win at Vancouver. A draw would guarantee the Sounders a top 4 seed in home field in the first round. They would finish third if Houston does not win at Portland and drop to fourth otherwise. And a loss would leave the Sounders dependent on other results to stay in the top 4. Houston would jump them with a win. Salt Lake could catch them and win the tiebreaker with a win at Colorado, as would Vancouver with a win over LAFC. But draws or losses for any of those teams would leave them behind the Sounders.
I don't think anybody was following that.
it's,
Look, we're doing you a favor.
it's very complicated in soccer because, like in basketball,
By
you know,
reading out this complicated list of random cities, we're doing you a favor here.
normally you could just look at the 2 possible outcomes, but since you've got 3 in soccer, it increases the number of permutations exponentially. But we do need to talk about the Bunkers MLS playoff format, where MLS was like, "We're doing you a favor."
We're doing that's a good, yeah. This is a good bit actually.
So there's a play in between the 8 and 9 seeds.
Okay,
Then you've got the 8 teams in each conference.
totally checks out. All fairly normal so far.
Yeah, very NBA style. The top 4 seeds host a best of 3 series
Oh, love it.
over a 2-week span.
Those happen in soccer often throughout the world.
With games drawn after 90 minutes going immediately to PKs. It's a home-away-home format with the higher seed hosting the deciding game 3 if necessary.
It's whatever.
And then after that, then it's back to single elimination knockout the rest of the way. The first round is 3 games. The championship is 1 game. That is like never made any sense to me. That's actually like a classic MLS thing, though.
Isn't that? I mean, that's generally throughout, right? Like Champions League, you have the home and home.
They do have, yes,
with
the
road goals.
aggregate and then
You
the
just-
final.
Having multiple games to determine a championship. 1 game should determine a championship. That's the one thing that the NBA has wrong, because you're basically devaluing your own product. Or you're saying, I want to spread the value throughout. But like any individual
It's the
NBA
build up
Finals
of the
game,
tension.
you're telling me that soccer needs more buildup of tension.
No, I'm
The
saying
most
that it makes
built-up sport there
Well,
is.
that's fair.
Aside from Huskies versus Oregon last Saturday,
it does not need
soccer's got a tension
games,
problem.
3 games between the 1 seed and the 8 seed, and then 1 game for the final.
No, it's pretty wild. I'm so fascinated where they come up with stuff. And that it's like a new format just constantly.
I think this does harken back. Yes, they're constantly changing formats. I think they did something like this in the early days of MLS, pre-Sounders. So we barely know it existed.
I also just like, we should probably be harkening back to those days, right? They were great. Do you feel like there's a chance that MLS is like, the messy thing has been huge?
Yeah.
That they're like, maybe the market share is fading. Maybe soccer lost.
To what?
The hippies were wrong. Maybe soccer lost.
Wow.
Maybe soccer's not that popular of a sport in the United States anymore.
I think soccer is a very popular sport in the United States. Whether the MLS
I guess, yes.
whether MLS is a popular
Well,
sport is a
honestly,
different question.
What the MLS should be doing is trying to limit availability of foreign soccer games.
They just should,
They should be going out of their way to block people from being able to watch British soccer and Spanish. Because when you know that's out there and then you have to watch this, it's not like college where like college is just like amateur NFL. And it's just like, actually, that's still great.
but they don't compete head to head against each other. That's still the point.
Yes, that they're in the same league. This is like, I mean, I watched the very, very beginning of the Welcome to
Wrexham.
documentary, right? And they're like, it's here. And then you've got people who are just like, working jobs, just happy to be a professional soccer player. Yeah. That's the MLS. That is the MLS version of international soccer, because there are so many great leagues throughout the world that people know and care about and have history with. They're not like, well, I think this was the format before our team existed. They're like, this team has existed for 100 years and is a fixture of our community. Not, we now have a team in
St. Louis.
St. Louis. Is that the most recent MLS team?
It is, yes. The newest MLS team.
They're like, we really struck out by not getting Sacramento in.
It looked like a slam dunk. I don't know what happened there. All right, OL Reign.
Or you're against the idea of promotion and relegation.
I am, yes.
You just it's so weird that you could be pro Bulls and anti promotion and relegation.
Oh, they're opposed because one provides a happy outcome for a lot of teams, and one provides a dreadful outcome for teams.
Talk about tension building up.
I mean, I suppose.
Throughout an entire season, you could just be in a whole different league. I actually think we need more promotion and relegation.
It destroys, it actually upends lives. Like when you watch have you watched Welcome to Sunderland? Or not Welcome to Sunderland.
We're doing Welcome to more things now?
Well, no, it's the same people who did Welcome to Wrexham. So after I watched the first season of Welcome to Wrexham, I watched it's Sunderland Till I Die is the name of the documentary series. And it's like amazing, but it's like the guy in the cafeteria is getting fired because the team got relegated.
I don't.
No.
I mean, I'm sure that is literally the case, but I do not know if that needs to be the case. You were probably talking about it.
It's too big of a monetary difference.
That they can't have a fucking cafeteria?
It's like, do you know how much money the difference is between being in the Premier League and the Championship?
And
then they went down to
evens out. If a team is promoted, just because you're not watching the documentary about them, the other team is hiring somebody for their cafeteria.
Yeah, I don't think it's a zero-sum thing, though.
You think it's just people are fired from cafeterias and no one is hired?
No, I'm saying that it's much worse to get fired from your job because of something you have no control over than to get hired to a new job because of something because there's no stability in those two things as opposed to one person just continuing to work the same job.
I like the idea of promotion and relegation is boiled down to one person being fired from a cafeteria.
Macroeconomics.
That's what it's boiled down to. But the money is ultimately generally the same.
I mean, yes, the amount in the system is the same.
Spread throughout. But the reality is, because of promotion and relegation, all of those people have to spend more to try to stay there, which is more important for the workforce, right? Like if we're talking it from that perspective,
I suppose.
having a strong workforce is how you end up not being relegated. So you would spend more in every single aspect that you're doing with the goal of and the intent of staying up if you're a fringe team. Is that not right?
It also,
at the same time,
we don't have time to fucking discuss relegation and promotion on this podcast.
We're doing you a favor by discussing promotion and relegation.
The other issue with it is that it forces teams to hire like the 80-year-old English manager who sits there in a fucking tracksuit on the sideline and never plays any of the young players and tries to ground out a 0-0 draw, as opposed to like actually developing young talent on a tanking
let those
team.
smaller programs develop the young talent and then buy them.
Anyway, OL Reign, after going to the locker room scoreless on Sunday's NWSL decision day, the Reign exploded for 3 goals in the second half, with Megan Rapinoe scoring a brace in her final regular season game to end her NWSL regular season career with 51 goals. Fellow OG Jess Fishlock netted the other in a 3-0 win that pushed the Reign up to 4th in the standings, thanks to Gotham City FC drawing with Kansas City elsewhere. That means the Reign will host Angel City FC on Friday night in the opening round of the NWSL playoffs, putting their streak of 9 consecutive knockout losses on the line. The good news is, unlike last year's home loss to the Current in the NWSL playoffs, or their loss to Racing Louisville in the NWSL Challenge Cup, this is not a semifinal, which they have lost 8 consecutive of.
Okay.
Because the NWSL playoffs expanded to 6 teams, making this the quarterfinals with the top 2 teams, Portland and the arch rival, the hated San Diego Wave, getting a bye directly to the semifinals. Angel City made a late charge up the NWSL standings, including their first ever win over the Reign on August 27th at Lumen Field, going 4-1-1 over their last 6 games, capped by a 5-1 win Sunday over the Thorns to claim the 5th seed and reach the playoffs for the first time in their second season as an expansion team. Angel City finished tied for second in the NWSL with 31 goals, but allowed 35th most. Reign allowed just 24, tied for 4th fewest. It's a balanced offensive attack for Angel City, with 6 different players scoring at least 3 goals. But again, the big story here, Megan Rapinoe getting at least one more time playing in front of the home fans. You'll love to see it. All right, some quick notes on UW basketball.
Hello.
Last week was Pac-12 Media Days for the men and the women. The UW women were picked 9th by coaches and 10th by media, flipping places with Oregon State in the 2 polls. It's a testament to the depth of the conference, which sent 7 teams to the NCAA tournament last year, had 6 teams in my ESPN colleagues Charlie Cream's preseason top 25. UW returned 6 of the top 8 players in points and minutes per game from last year's team that reached the WNIT championship game, having lost seniors Haley Van Dyke and Trinity Oliver. The UW men were picked 9th by media ahead of Washington State, Cal, and Oregon State. Ken Palm projections are out and are a bit more optimistic, putting the Huskies 78th overall and 8th in the Pac-12, projected for a 9-11 conference record.
Do we feel like the team? I thought we were kind of optimistic on the team.
I'm kind of optimistic on the team. Yeah.
Of them finishing better than this. I feel like...
I mean, the Pac-12 is actually pretty good this year at basketball, it seems like, too.
What happened?
I don't know. It's like a death spasm.
Is that death spasm?
Is that their term?
Something good happens right before it dies.
I
Is there like a pre-death clarity or something?
I guess that's not what the term means at all. Wow.
What? Yeah. Death spasm sounded pretty sinister. Whatever. Didn't look great. Whatever you look at, we're doing you a favor by looking up death spasm. Anyway. I don't know. I mean, I almost know none of these names aside from you talking about them. So I feel like we couldn't have that great of a grasp of how good the team is.
I mean, the fact that there's so many new pieces probably makes them a little more difficult to predict. But we'll see. Like a 78th best team can make the NCAA tournament, that's for sure.
Okay. I'm probably interested in this Husky basketball season.
I'm interested in this Husky basketball season, question mark. All right, let's talk about the Seahawks, who suffered a 17-13 loss Sunday at Cincinnati in about the most frustrating fashion, I would say, possible. Like repeatedly driving into the red zone in the 4th quarter for the potential go-ahead touchdown, only to be unable to score. They're 10 points on 5 trips to the red zone on Sunday, the second fewest points per trip for any team with at least 5 this season, behind only the game played on Sunday night last week, the New York Giants against Buffalo, when they had 9 points in 5 trips to the red zone. Over the course of the season, the Seahawks' 3.88 points per trip in the red zone are the 4th lowest in the NFL.
Yeah, it's tough to say how much of this is talent, play calling, randomness. I mean, we're still talking about a relatively small sample size.
I mean, start with randomness. First, rule out randomness. That's my law.
What do you mean first rule out randomness?
Like, start by assuming something's random, and if you can rule that out, then do that. But don't start by looking for a reason.
We obviously can't rule out randomness here.
Exactly.
But that's not a fun conversation to have. So there are reasons, whether randomness is the most likely reason. There are sub-reasons for something happening. I think they're running the ball when you get the ball. We've seen this forever. I don't know if this is statistically backed or whatever.
It didn't bear out as much as I hoped it would when I researched it.
But we're talking about the ball at like the 10. And I feel like that's where the Seahawks ended up a lot in this game.
They did.
Was on the cusp of the goal line, not the red zone, the cusp of the goal line. End goal, some number end goal, and it wasn't quite at the 1 or the 2 or whatever. It was funny that we saw it the day before with the Huskies not scoring on 4 plays from the goal line as well, and it kind of felt like just, what the hell? Why can't we figure this out? But some of the carries, I do think there's a little bit of like, these were all, as far as I remember, Ken Walker carries there. There was not a Charbonnet carry near the goal line. And it's just kind of not what Ken Walker does particularly well, even though he does have a couple of goal line touchdowns. He has
a lot of touchdowns this season.
But I think those were generally from closer. They weren't like 8-yard runs or something like that, how they got there. I think Geno kind of just had a bad game overall, but also the play calling just looked, it was uninspiring.
It was an uneven game for sure for Geno. They kicked a field goal on 1st and goal from the 5.
Hopefully not on 1st and goal from the 5.
Well, after starting.
Honestly, I would have taken it at points in the game.
That would have been a real mistake. I concede that information. When Geno got intercepted, it was they started out 1st and goal from the 4.
So frustrating.
Both of those were Ken Walker, the third 1-yard runs on 1st down. The 2 plays that they turned the ball over on downs, 1st and goal at the 7 on the first one, and then it was never 1st and goal because it was 1st and 10 at the 11. They have the opportunity on the final drive.
Okay, so they were actually a little bit closer than I thought. But you look at those Ken Walker runs, if you're kind of telegraphing run there, and it's 1st and goal from the 4, the 5 or whatever, Ken Walker picks up a yard. It doesn't put you any closer to a touchdown.
Yep.
And it doesn't open up the playbook anymore, right? Aside from that is the play when the Seahawks should be going play action or rolling Geno out. The play, after watching this, I was watching the Cowboys and the Chargers, and not to take anything positive from the Chargers play calling necessarily, but by the time they got to a...
Whoa, easy there.
Herbert was bad.
Were that annotate Kellen Moore?
I think Kellen Moore is fine. When Herbert was slinging it at the end, I was like, hell
We've seen the Cowboys offense without Kellen Moore.
No, it's all bad. It's bad for everybody. But I was
Let me tell you, the people of the internet. So, by the way, Nate Tice of the Athletic Football Show pointed out that teams are scoring touchdowns on 53% of their red zone drives, the lowest rate through week 6 since 2011. And everyone who replies to him thinks, not everyone, but that it's because teams don't run the ball enough anymore. This is the running backs don't matter era.
Teams are running the ball.
They run the ball way too fucking much.
I don't look. I think the Seahawks in general, their play calling has been pretty good.
Oh, between the 20s, like they've been awesome.
Those series when they get there, it's an interesting place that they're very bad at using tight ends near the goal line, right? There's the touchdown to Bobo a couple weeks ago, but like they haven't really used tight ends. They haven't really figured out how to unlock DK Metcalf there necessarily. The plays that work
are still trying to figure out how to get the ball to Jimmy Graham.
No, it's. They kept circling in the broadcast. It was like DK Metcalf 1-on-1. And they tried it a couple times, but maybe not enough. That to me was maybe let's just try this a few times.
Right. And the pass protection, certainly on that final drive, was a factor as well.
There were a lot of factors, but the play that the Chargers ran, it was a touchdown. I think it was to Keenan Allen, wide open, right? Herbert rolls out, Keenan Allen is running into space. Herbert throws it in front of him. Easy touchdown.
I believe that was from the 2, right?
And it was on a 4th down that they scored that. And it was like, that is the kind of play you have to use the field lengthwise at the goal line. Like, you have to use the entire field.
You can't go widthwise because you can't go
but like,
down the field.
That has to be the way that it happens. It's easier to defend, but you have to get people to think you're going one way and then go another way, or even have a player going another way. I know it's easier said than done, but like, the Seahawks didn't really try too many of those types of plays in this game where they got, and I understand the offensive line being injured, not having the usual group or the group that they were expecting to have, but it felt to me like that was the play that they were missing in this game. And then I got to the point where on the last drive, I fully expected them not to score. There was no doubt in my mind that they weren't going to score in that game or on that drive. It was like, I would love if they did, but I just do not see it. The running from the like 11 or whatever, it's like, this isn't working. Geno not having time. Geno honestly having a pretty questionable game in a lot of places, especially decision-making wise.
I think it was definitely a very uneven game.
Because
there were great moments.
Were there great moments that Geno
For
had?
sure.
There was a ball to Lockett that like was perfect. I think Geno's throws generally were pretty good. There were huge mistakes. Obviously, the DK pick, the first pick wasn't great either. Having 2 picks in a game is like, Pete Carroll must have been furious about that, right? But then the ball that he missed, where literally we're watching it, and you could see in the line of vision before the replay, Jackson Smith and Jigba being wide open for a touchdown. It's like, if you miss it, you miss it. And it felt like Geno, I don't know if he was gun shy or whatever, or if he just didn't see it, like how they ended up not throwing that ball. It also, I appreciated the way that they used Jackson Smith and Jigba in this game, and that
great.
He was in that route at that time. And who knows, maybe there's not the comfort with him as a receiver or whatever that Geno has, but I was shocked that he didn't let that one fly.
I think it's mostly just that shit happens because there's like a bunch of guys trying to tackle you.
11
They're really
giant
large
dudes trying to tackle
guys.
you. Yes. But that was the type of play that you don't see missed in the NFL by a quarterback like Geno Smith very often.
His QBR was pretty bad. I mean, obviously you get 2 interceptions, 4 sacks. It's a tough day at the office. I think the important takeaway here is the Seahawks were much better on a yards per play basis. The third downs actually kind of evened out. They regressed to the mean in that regard.
There was one third down where they'd given DK like 6. It was like
that was a perplexing
3rd and 7, and they gave him like
the
9
corner
yards.
played off.
And you're just like, yeah, sure. And when they threw, it was like one of those plays where you're screaming at the TV, where you're like, throw it to DK here. And then they just threw it to DK, and you're like, easy.
Yeah.
Football should always be this easy.
The defense was pretty damn good against Cincinnati, especially after the last 2 drives.
After the first 2 drives.
Yes, after the first 2 drives. Joe Burrow at that point, I believe, had completed 10 consecutive passes, was 10 of 12 to start this. After the first 2 drives, he was 15 of 27 for 110 yards. And
it was wild.
Like, he missed some throws, but also, like, this was the first time the Seahawks have had the full complement on defense, other than, I guess, the first 7 plays against the Giants. And we started to see, like, for all the Jamal Adams disbelievers out there, he played a terrific game. Devin Witherspoon playing a lot of time again in the slot, playing both in the slot and outside. Trey Brown,
monster game.
an awesome game. The best game of Trey Brown's career,
I mean,
without
the 2
question.
plays that he made, where they got the OPI, which was shocking that they called it. I was just waiting for them to say pass interference defense, because they just do not.
Yes.
The confidence that the Seahawks, nobody was nervous on, like, I
On
was
the
like, okay, the
sideline?
Seahawks know that this is an OPI, I think.
But
it was still just shocking that they called it an OPI. But then Trey Brown breaking up the pass with the penalty, like that, the pick that he had was beautiful. It was an incredible game.
I mean,
Trey
obviously,
Brown. I missed the first 2 drives because I was at Mateo's football game.
so as far as you're concerned, the Seahawks defense is just amazing.
I got home at halftime. I mean, I was like watching on my phone, and I was like, oh, fuck, Burrow's roasting us.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I guess the defense isn't good. But I got home at halftime, and from basically that point forward, the defense was dominant every single second. Like, Devin Witherspoon didn't have the one huge play, but was in so many plays, hits hard. He's the type of player that defenses are accounting for now. And his whole like energy on the field is a difference. But adding Jamal Adams to that as well, and the way that Trey Brown is playing, plus a little bit of pass rush, Trey Jones getting into the mix, like I love the way that Jarran Reed has been playing as well this year.
Yeah.
Like I think this defense has a legitimate chance.
A few less offsides than we saw on Sunday would be nice. The thought that occurred to me on Sunday about Devin Witherspoon is, like, the Rams made a big deal about Jalen Ramsey playing the star position where he was going to be close to the ball. And, like, that's basically what Devin Witherspoon is doing right now.
You're close to the ball if you get yourself close to the ball also. Some players are close to the ball.
But playing in the slot, I do think, is the ideal use of his skill set. Like, obviously, you want him to be able to play on the outside in situations where you're in a base defense. But I think this should be his permanent role. I mean, Kobe Bryant and Artie Barnes presumably are coming back at some point. But they should not change this. Trey Brown needs to be on the field the way that he's playing.
Absolutely. I thought Reek also, like, you didn't even see him that much, but he made a handful of plays where you're just like, damn, okay.
There was one other thought I had during the game on Sunday, which is like the whole this happened after we recorded last week. Certainly, the whole, like, you know, DK saying that Devin Witherspoon's going to lock up Jamar Chase. Like, number one, he probably wasn't good. Number one, he probably wasn't going to do that. But number two, like, DK, you've seen the Seahawks defense before, right? Like, they don't match corners to wide receivers. You're aware of that, right? So it was going to be a lot of different people on Jamar Chase.
Locking up Jamar Chase.
And it was.
Which they did.
After the first 2 drives, they were awesome.
I mean, it was so frustrating that the Seahawks lost this game because you could just feel that, like, the entire time
it was right there for them to win.
They were the better team. And this was to go 4-1. We didn't know that the Niners were going to lose as well, but they were the better team. And this is not like, there's a difference between being the better team against the Cardinals or whatever. This is a team that was in the Super Bowl 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a bad Bengals team, even for how they've been playing so far this year. It is an extraordinarily talented Bengals team, especially on offense. And for the Seahawks to have done that, you look at where the Lions are at. Like, I don't mean to rationalize, but like,
I promised we were going to rationalize on this podcast.
Here's what I'm not going to rationalize though, is every single win matters in the NFL.
For sure.
And that
I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but it's the question of the long-term outlook.
The long-term outlook is still very good for the Seahawks. I think defensively, maybe even more so than offensively, right? Like, you look at the pieces that are in place defensively.
Let's remain calm. They're still 8th in offensive DVOA and 16th in defensive DVOA. Or excuse me, 9th and 16th.
We would take, but like, the defense is getting better. So I wouldn't be, this might be pie in the sky. I wouldn't be shocked if we get to like week 12 and people look around and are like, oh shit, the Seahawks team is a legit Super Bowl contender. All of a sudden, they're winning games by 30 points. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if things clicked into place. What is the year? 2015? 12 style? Not, that's Super Bowl year, right?
No, 2012 is the first year that Russell Wilson's
No, I'm talking
year.
about 2015. Thomas Rawls, 14 or 15. Thomas Rawls.
Yeah,
when they secretly were the best team in the NFL, and things clicked into place.
Yeah, that was 2015 when Russell Wilson had the best stretch of his career in the second half of that season. I don't know. I see that coming. I think it's,
but I think they.
But I think it's more like 2012.
Team-wise, I think they're better than that.
I don't know. The offense was really fucking good back then, and I do think there's a ceiling on the offense with Geno Smith at quarterback. I think that ceiling is still quite high, and people are getting a little too down on Geno Smith right now in the wake of this game.
He didn't even necessarily play a bad. Geno will be back. Geno will be good.
Especially in the context of, like, look around. We see what it looks like when you have really terrible quarterback play. And when the rest of the team is held back by that position. The rest of the team is not being held back by that position.
Absolutely not.
So.
No, I think Geno ultimately had a fine game and made some really bad mistakes. And that is okay. That has not happened to him that many times as starting quarterback of the Seahawks the last 2 years. So it's frustrating. But what I'm saying is there was something there for the taking for the Seahawks to both have the same record as the Niners. You can't lose games, especially games like this. You're going to lose in the NFL. But I think we will look back at this game in 10 weeks or something and be like, fuck, if we just won that game.
Yeah.
Whether it's making the playoffs, whether it's seeding in the playoffs, whether it's the division or something like that. I am less convinced. Obviously, they both just lost. I was less convinced about the Niners and the Eagles. Well, the Niners looked pretty freaking good last week. I think there is the top tier of the NFC. Seeing the Cowboys be basically needing some luck against the Chargers to win that game. And I know it was the road, but ultimately it was like that was a home game for them. It's like the Cowboys are kind of a middle-of-the-road NFL team. And I think the Lions are probably the third best team in the NFC. We've already beaten the Lions on the road. So the Seahawks have to be in that conversation. If they hadn't blown this game, they would be in the position that the Lions are in right now. And people would be like, don't look now. That's when the don't look now would have come this week if the Seahawks hadn't blown such a stupid game.
If I recall correctly, the don't look now didn't work out so well. But we were doing you a favor. All right, let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals who are coming to town on Sunday.
Am I right about that last diatribe?
That winning games matters, or that they would be a trendy team if they had won?
Both.
Yes.
Great.
Arizona comes
Thanks
in.
for the positive affirmation.
You're good enough.
I needed that.
I'm doing you a favor. The Arizona Cardinals come in 25th in DVOA.
You out there, the listener, are totally right about whatever you're thinking too.
Whatever
Whether
you
it's the exact opposite is what we are saying.
Whatever you think about St. Louis style pizza, whatever you think about Jerry DiPoto, 25th in
Eating
DVOA.
that pizza might be doing you a favor.
Oh no!
I don't know.
I ate the Costco burger, so you don't have to. 12th in offense, 31st in
Right
defense,
to the Costco burger.
12th in special teams. I hope it burns in hell. Low expectations for the Cardinals with Kyler Murray injured and DeAndre Hopkins traded in the offseason. The offense has actually been pretty good with Josh Dobbs at quarterback. They started a competitive 1-2 with 2 one-score losses where the team led much of the way and a 28-16 win over those aforementioned Cowboys. But since then, the Cardinals have lost 3 in a row by an average of 16.7 points, and they might be who we thought they were. All right,
No,
Denny Green.
they're not who we thought they were. They're not the worst team in the NFL. They might be bad.
There's a chance. I mean, we thought they were like by far number 32.
People were talking about them tanking,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Dobbs has completed 63% of his passes, albeit for just 6.2 yards per attempt with a middling 49 QBR. He's 27th in the EPA plus CPOE composite. Dobbs is largely taking care of the ball with just 3 interceptions and does add a rushing threat. Marquise Hollywood Brown has been the top receiving threat, averaging a career low 6.3 yards per target and catching a career low of 55% of targets. Dobbs has also relied heavily on Zach Ertz, who's averaging just 7.0 yards per reception. Rondale Moore at 7.4 yards per reception, also not getting much bang for his catch buck. The more dangerous Cardinals threats have been rookie receiver Michael Wilson, who's averaging 17.6 yards per reception and catching 82% of his targets, and second-year tight end Trey McBride averaging 9.4 yards per target.
How many receptions is that for Michael Wilson, though? It must be very low.
It's around 20, I think.
All right.
Enough that I added him to my fantasy team a couple weeks ago.
Did you?
Just in time for him to regress to the...
Uh-huh.
The Cardinals ranked number 9 in rushing EPA per play. James Conner was shockingly effective, averaging a career high of 5.4 yards per carry before he went on an IR with a knee injury suffered in their loss to Cincinnati. Without him, the Cardinals used Keontae Ingram, Damian Williams, and Amari DeMercado in last Sunday's loss to the Rams, where they combined for a solid 87 yards on 20 carries. The Arizona defense has been bad. It's been traded for at least 380 yards in every game since the opening loss at Washington. They're a 29th in EPA per play on dropbacks, 24th defending runs. Budda Baker went on IR after the season opener, although he may return to practice this week. New head coach Jonathan Gannon wouldn't rule out Kyler Murray returning to practice this week, but it seems inconceivable the Cardinals would rush his recovery from an ACL tear. Cardinals allowing opponents to complete 71% of passes for 8.0 yards per attempt, third highest in NFL. They are above average in terms of sack rate without a single dominant edge rusher. 5 different Arizona players have at least 2 sacks.
The Michael Wilson season is so strange. I mean, he does have, like, his yards per reception are pretty monster.
Yeah.
Right? Like 3 receptions, 62 yards against the Rams. But then you have all of these other players at, like, 7.6 yards per reception. or whatever.
I mean, the Cardinals have done that for a while. Like, I don't know if it's Rondell Moore specifically, but like their tight ends for a long period of time, like lots of targets and very few yards.
It's just like,
Although we thought we got rid of that with Cliff Kingsbury getting fired.
yeah, no, it just continues. People were so hyped on Jonathan Gannon after that Cowboys win as well, where they're like, maybe we were wrong about Jonathan Gannon. Maybe he is amazing or whatever. And it's just
it's too early to say.
well, and also he's
Gannon.
the coach of the Cardinals with Josh Dobbs as his quarterback and that awful defense. You know, like I wouldn't necessarily hold anything as both a pro or negative about Jonathan Gannon, but
whether you get on the bus or you get off whether you got here on the bus or drove, we did you a favor. I don't know if I landed that plane.
The reality is, having an offense like that is not an effective NFL offense, and it might be influenced more by having a quarterback like Josh Dobbs, who's not going to be able to get the ball downfield that effectively over time. Right. But yards per reception to me is probably the most important thing to look at for a quarterback and an offense overall, and to know whether they're a successful one. And right now, that's something that the Cardinals are not doing. It also is not the kind of offense that the Seahawks have not been able to handle.
Oh.
Like, I mean, they'll get some first downs. I'm not concerned about that. But, like, this is not
especially their ability to tackle at this point.
Yeah, all of a sudden, wow, the Seahawks' ability to tackle? Am I right here? Am I hearing this correctly?
I don't know if you're aware of this. They used to have a very effective tackling defense.
I know, but we went through all of last season with that Seahawks defense, and now all of a sudden they can tackle?
Everything was worth it because it all led to drafting Devin Witherspoon.
Also, Russell Wilson is that is
not great. Not great.
I just can't. It's almost hard to process just how bad. And like, I think Sean Payton might be intentionally tanking Russell Wilson's career at this point. Like, it's just getting worse. But I will still believe in Russell Wilson is like Jared Kelenic to me, which is hilarious that he is a Super Bowl winning quarterback. And I'm like,
what a comparison.
I will still believe in him after everybody else doesn't believe in him anymore. But I'm like, Russell Wilson will have he will have a renaissance season somewhere. I don't think it's going to be in Denver, but he's going to have a renaissance season somewhere along the line at a lot less money than he's making right now.
The Cardinals.
I was like, and I was talking about something. I think it had to do with, I blacked out and said Jared Kelenic.
I lost my train of thought.
But no, Jared Kelenic is going to be an all-star next year.
It's not time for M's hot takes.
That's not even a hot take. That's just a neutral, average perspective.
Zach Jabal didn't email it to us. Chances of victory in this one?
I think they're very high, considering this Seahawks defense. I think Geno is about to have a real bounce back game against the Cardinals offense, partially just because he kind of has to after last week's performance, and also like they know what happened. They're going to be scoring touchdowns, and the crowd's going to be very relieved when they score those touchdowns. I think they win this game comfortably. I think it's like a 20-point victory. It's like an 85% chance of victory.
I'm also going to say 85%. I don't know that necessarily translates to a 20-point victory, although, again, average margin of 16.7 points in the Cardinals' last 3 losses. All right, let's wrap up with the Washington Huskies. Coming off of their 36-33 win over arch rival Oregon, they've moved up to number 5 in both the AP and coaches poll at undefeated 6-0. We learned a little more. This we didn't know on Saturday night when we recorded, the degree to which Michael Penix Jr. was dealing with cramping in the fourth quarter. One of the things that Ryan Grubb mentioned is that's why they didn't call for a sneak.
I was kind of wondering about that. I was like, he's kind of skinny.
I mean, they've done it with him before. I thought it was partially because of the fact that he got hit hard on that drive, although Grubb said that actually wasn't that serious of a hit. Jalen McMillan played just 7 snaps before his, quote, knee gave out a little bit, according to Grubb. Well, Jeremy Bernard...
I didn't realize he played any snaps at all.
He wasn't targeted, so unless we were like specifically paying attention, you wouldn't realize that. I think it was on the second drive where you were like, hey, where's Jalen McMillan? And we saw him on the sidelines with his helmet, without his helmet, making it clear that he had re-aggravated the injury. Jeremy Bernard left after suffering an apparent leg injury on a kickoff return.
Well, we all saw that one real time.
Yes.
and came back with his foot heavily bandaged.
McMillan was scheduled to see the doctor on Monday, but we haven't gotten an update yet. With those two injuries, even before the Bernard injury, Giles Jackson played the second most snaps of his UW career, according to Christian Capel.
And he was awesome.
He was. Yeah, had a huge fourth down catch, had a touchdown catch. Big day for Giles Jackson, but you would like to see a little more rotation at the receiver position this week. As the Huskies go up against Arizona State.
We're not talking about Arizona State yet.
Oh, okay.
I just really want to bask in this victory for a second.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, I'll be
Did you watch the recap video?
Did I watch the recap video? It was one of those things where you just watch it and you're like, this is a moment, no matter what happens for the rest of the year.
I kept pausing it to see if we could see ourselves in the stands.
I was looking a lot.
I think we could see the folks next to us.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
They're very tall.
Yeah. And also just like the way the camera was, it happened to be a little bit to
On
our...
which play?
All right. Well, like just when they're showing it after the game or after the touchdown when there's a shot of Odunze celebrating that shows the East end zone.
It was so freaking nuts down there. Like that moment of honestly, it is unlike anything else. I think this may have been the best sporting event I've ever been to in my entire life. Or the most fun sporting event. I think it might have been the most fun sporting event.
So I think my friend Kevin Jackson, who my former ESPN colleague now at Fox Sports, who has been attending UW games for a while and said that it was number one among the games that he's attended. Christian Capel sort of in his recap on Montlake sort of reiterated what I said in terms of this ticking all these different boxes, more boxes than any win. But ahead of the 2013 NFC Championship or the 2014 NFC Championship game,
were very fun. The 13 kind of like it was a good game, but ultimately
I would ask you to consult the emergency pod recorded in the wake of that game.
It was obviously amazing, but like looking down, there is an atmosphere at a Husky Stadium that is different, and I think that's why it was maybe more fun because. Being there, like football, NFL games are a different feeling than a college game. You're like, we are all in this together. There was such a camaraderie that happened with the people. And after we scored the touchdown, the touchdown to go up, right, to Odunze, seeing the East end zone as like people having their arms around each other and you can see it moving, right? That seeing like just the vibrations of humanity.
You're saying the fact that the stadium is constructed worse.
But you're closer together. We're on those bench seats. I love our fucking seats, how close we are. At a Seahawks game, I'm way up high looking down. Like we're all celebrating having an amazing time or whatever, but you can't quite be as close to each other. And you can't quite have the same thing.
You don't have 5 people in 3 seats.
I mean, that's part of it, right? Like we're packed in, just everybody is right there on top of each other. So I was looking down and it is just like fucking pandemonium.
I mean, it was
in front of us. And that is unlike anything that I have ever seen. And I was looking at it, I was like, this is wild how into this moment everybody is. And I was there too.
You're putting it ahead of Game 5 in 95?
I think that was, I was fucking 10. I don't know.
Fair.
I think that was probably the closest, maybe, is just like such a collective group of people all together. Like there's something about it being the NFC Championship game that almost like brings in more casual fans to a certain extent. I don't know. It was a great atmosphere. I'm not... that's the tier that we were talking about.
Yeah.
But I do not remember a moment looking around the stadium and just when he missed the field goal, like I keep trying to like, like there's like a Black Mirror episode where you can like rewind your life and rewatch it. And like, I feel like I remember seeing it sail to the right or whatever. And it's just an eruption. It's not like, I can't even like picture the moment anymore. And it was like 3 days ago. You know what I mean?
I can picture.
I wish
that field goal was so close.
It is one of those things where you're just like that. Just like I didn't black out, but like all of a sudden he missed it. Like we saw him miss it, and everybody erupting all at once, it is kind of unlike anything that I have ever experienced. I mean, the tip again is the only thing that could be close to it, I suppose.
The double.
And it is one of those three moments. I don't know. It was so much fun, and watching the video after and the people just instantly storming the field. You know what I mean? Like just seeing the crowd like get it and move around. It was unlike any experience that you can have in your entire life.
Even I can't hate on that field storming.
No. Just the perfect group of like people being there and all caring so much on that last drive, how loud it was. You know what I mean? Like it was, I guess maybe the thing that made it so much better was how uncharacteristic it was of Husky football to a certain extent. And maybe for Seahawks games, like, of course it was loud at the NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
Of course the crowd is good. We'd been a good crowd for multiple years in a row or something. But this was
also the self-congratulatory 12th man thing. By that point.
This was something. I mean, look, the Husky fans are self-congratulatory as well.
I'm not saying they're not, but there's no self-congratulatory. They're self-congratulatory about how pretty the stadium is.
Yeah, and you could be in a boat and near it. Both at the same time, near a stadium in a boat? Whoa. Nobody's in the stadium. Okay, but here's the point that I wanted to make to you. Because I thought long and hard about this.
Most of them are out getting beer at halftime.
Was why this is the most important victory and the most fun victory, the most important victory in a long time. Also, did you see the clip of Chris Peterson celebrating?
I did.
Oh, so good. It was just like one of those things. It was like when Dame hit the 3 against the Thunder, and you're like, I just need to see people reacting to this. I need to see the clip. I want to see the Thunder being upset. I want to see tweets about it. I just need more and more and more. And I was in that same moment as everybody else of like, I was like, can I find another Husky podcast to just hear people talking about it? Because there's not enough information available right after. There's so many fucking Seahawks podcasts. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many places to go.
That's why this is our new niche. We're leaning hard into we're a Husky football podcast.
I mean, I care more about Husky football. The next day, I was like, I care about the Seahawks, but it is nowhere near the amount that I care
there was
about.
Nothing that could have happened to the Seahawks on Sunday that would have ruined the high.
It is UW versus Oregon. I care more about UW this season probably than I do about the Seahawks. And I hate Oregon more than I hate any other team. In any sport, everybody included, Oregon football is at the absolute top. Because there's other shit that we need to talk about. You're missing a lot of points that we have not gotten to.
Okay.
This was the greatest win in the last fucking...
I was the one who made that argument on
25
the
years.
pod.
So, okay. I looked back at it. Chris Peterson era, right? Chris Peterson, probably... I don't want to be dating back to like old days of Husky football, but like... let's say 1970 on or something. I think Chris Peterson is indisputably the second best Washington coach, right?
Yeah.
Chris Peterson did not have a signature win.
I know. I agree.
So you look through the Chris Peterson tenure, and like Sark had like a signature win beating USC, but the stakes were kind of like, it was an upset victory. It wasn't like...
Also, it wasn't a very good USC team.
It was huge at the time, and it was awesome, and it's still a great win to have had that moment.
It was just like, look, we're back on the map after a year in purgatory.
And I still always will have love for Sark for his tenure here, but like
more than almost anyone.
Oh, about Sark? Literally, we fucking sat through an 0-12 season. If anybody wants to talk shit about Coach Sark, he's the one. The domino starts. This particular domino. This is Coach Sark's hiring was the Russell Wilson trade to Kalen DeBoer's Devin Witherspoon.
I don't think that math checks out.
You could only listen to the Peltoncast and understand that comparison. But
I'm gonna go with like, it's gonna be a depressing. It's like trading Eric Snow and you end up with Rashard Lewis. Drafting Rashard Lewis is something in there.
If Rashard Lewis ever achieved anything in his career.
How dare you?
No. The 05 Sonics, come on.
That's third-pound brother Rashard Lewis to you, sir.
This is not personal about Rashard Lewis. So anyway, the Chris Peterson tenure, right? Indisputably one of the best time period. Is probably the second best time period of
It's
our
like
entire.
trading Mark Langston and ending up with Freddie Garcia and Carlos Guillen.
But when you look at it, he lost the signature win against Oregon was against a bad Oregon team, and obviously, like, no disrespect to 70-21, one of the greatest wins against Oregon of all time.
No disrespect to the point.
So that was a huge victory, but it was different, right? It wasn't the same as having a very good Oregon team and beating them.
It was not.
He went to New Year's Six Bowls 3 years in a row, lost, right? Played at Auburn, not to Bo Nix.
I mean, I do think there's an element of like, this is one of the things that annoys me in sports is like, the big game is whatever it is the next game. So like, they did win 2 Pac-12 championship
But wait,
games.
listen, hold on. Game day is in Seattle against USC. Lost that game. The previous biggest crowd at Husky Stadium. Lost. Lost to Boise State when he was there. The biggest wins under Chris Peterson's tenure, this is no disrespect to Chris Peterson, who's an amazing coach, put so many players in the NFL, literally ushered the program into a new era of being in the place where they're able to be going to the Big Ten, because apparently it's really hard to go to the Big Ten, to join the ranks of Rutgers. But like, Chris Peterson deserves all due respect for that time period. But his biggest win was a Pac-12 championship against Colorado, which everybody was, when Colorado left for the Big 12, they were the butt of the joke. It was Colorado. It was a Pac-12 championship win against
Look,
Utah.
I just don't think that Dan Lanning knows his Pac-12 championship game history.
It was a Pac-12 championship win against Utah in a close game, but like,
And a really ugly game. Both of those were just not pleasant to watch at all.
and those are two teams, the two newest teams to the Pac-12. There's no rivalry. There's no history. It's just like, we're not going to look back and think. I couldn't tell you. I remember the Byron Murphy pick six. That is it from those two games combined.
Yeah.
So they're kind of just
You
some
didn't mention
games.
the Stanford win.
That's what I was going to say.
Oh,
His
okay.
signature win is a Friday night, 44-6, against a Stanford team that came in and had kind of beaten the Huskies quite a few times. They were a foil to us, Stanford, and it was a monster win. I think that Stanford team ended up being good, but not amazing.
No, they ended up being fine.
They ended up being fine. They
But they seemed
overranked.
good at the time.
I don't think that's what this Oregon Ducks team is.
I don't think so either.
And they're also, you just cannot have as big of a victory against Stanford as you can have against Oregon. Like,
I
literally,
remember someone who used to really hate Stanford.
I still hate Stanford, but it just means more here thing. The people of Stanford cannot care enough about football
That's a fair
for
point.
it to matter that much. Oregon has fans. We saw some of them.
Even when Stanford was like beating us 41-3 in the pouring rain in Jim Harbaugh's last season there,
I recall.
there's still one of those Stanford fans like gloating about it in
No,
the
you're
stands.
just like, this sucks. That's it. It's just like, this is a shitty day that I'm having. But it would have been a lot shittier if there were Stanford fans. Fortunately, part of the reason that I hate Stanford is that they don't care. So, but it was like, it's a fine victory. I remember it. I remember being so excited going into it. It was in the Peltoncast era. I think we were nervous about it.
Of course, it was in the Peltoncast era, yeah.
So, but that being your signature win, at no point aside from that victory on that Friday night did Chris Peterson have a monster game. Did Chris Peterson's Husky football team have a monster game to the magnitude of this and win? And I think that's what makes this feel different, especially after the win last year in Oregon. Being able to beat Oregon twice. This is like, the rivalry with Oregon is too, it's not fucking War Eagle or Roll Tide, but like, there's a reality that people in Ohio State might not be as happy with Ryan Day as they should be, despite all the winning, because he doesn't beat Michigan. This is the game that matters. And that's the other thing that I'll give Chris Peterson respect for. The total domination over Wazoo, right? Complete and utter domination of Wazoo year after year
Respect
after
to Jimmy
year.
Lake on that one, too.
And that is an impressive thing. It
Never got
honestly,
a chance to coach a game against Washington State as head coach.
It is not beating them all of those years. They were never as good of a team as Oregon probably is now. And it just doesn't matter as much as Oregon. That's the reality. Beating Oregon is a bigger game, and that's been borne out now as they are a protected rival. We are in the Big Ten. We know we're going to be playing Oregon every year. We don't know if we're going to be playing Wazoo every year. We think we will. We would like to be, but this is it. This is who we've got. We are stuck in this terrible marriage with Oregon, and we hate it and we love it at the same time. But this is who we have to beat. And Kalen DeBoer has been head coach of the University of Washington for 2 seasons, and he's beaten those motherfuckers back-to-back seasons. Woo!
As many times as Steve Sarkisian and Chris Peterson beat the Ducks combined. And Tyrone Willingham, maybe? I don't
Yes!
think they won under Tyrone Willingham either. Rick Neuheisel. He had some success against Oregon. We should note, by the way, that Troy Dannon had his introductory press conference last week after we recorded the pod. One thing he talked about was the challenge of continuing the Apple Cup because the Huskies' business model is predicated on having 7 home games per season. Currently, the Washington State home away is aligned with Oregon, which is now the swing in the Big Ten between whether the Huskies have 5 home games or 4. So something is going to have to give there. They can't continue playing the series on the current schedule under UW's financial terms.
What does that mean?
Like either they'd have to play it in a neutral site for a year or stop it for a year and then restart it. And then they could go to Pullman after that. Something along those lines. But it would have to be offset years from the Oregon home game.
If Wazoo doesn't want if UW is like, hey, can we do it on a neutral site for a year or whatever, and Wazoo's like, no, it would be such a cooking of it.
I mean, I can't
of a
really
situation.
blame them.
But the reality
Also,
is...
the neutral site is going to be Seattle.
yeah, I can think of a city that is pretty neutral.
It's a pretty favorable deal for you.
It's not going to be in Yakima. It's the Palm Springs of Washington. People are going to want to get there right after Thanksgiving.
Can we play it in? Wait, is Ellensburg the halfway point? Or you think Yakima is closer?
Look, we're doing you a favor. No, that makes sense though. But like, I think that they will figure that out because again, Wazoo needs the
when
game.
Troy
more
Dannon
than
mentioned this, UW President Anna Marie Kause said there are some conversations that you're not privy to yet. Basically, that's been
she was
happening,
like,
so.
"Cool the fuck off. We've barely talked about this."
No, she was like, we're already well down that road with Washington State. So
Yeah.
I do think it's going to continue.
I feel like that's a conversation they maybe should have had with Troy Dannon before the press conference.
You would
but
think.
I mean, that's
Should
just
have
me.
prepped him for that question. All right, anything else on the last week's game?
So good.
It was. We haven't even mentioned the Oregon fan who angrily kicked a trash can after the game.
Did he kick it or did he pull
Push it
down?
I don't know. Something.
I wasn't looking. It was violent. It was a violent move.
It reminded us all, of course, of you kicking a trash can after UW lost to BYU during the aforementioned 0-12 season.
Honestly, I stand by it. That was the most bullshit fucking penalty. Jake Locker scores the touchdown, flips the ball in the air, and the extra point to send the game to overtime against what we thought was a very good BYU team. It still haunts me to this day.
Wow, haunts you to this
Yeah,
day.
back-to-back wins against Oregon, whatever.
3 New Year's 6 playoff games. Doesn't matter. Can't erase that moment.
I'm sorry, but like, I don't know. People are gonna get mad at me. I'm not even gonna say it. It would have been nice to have won one of them.
I mean, I agree. It would have been nice to win one of them.
That's-
I still think I would trade the 0-12. Like, I'm happy to have the UW fan existence that includes an 0-12 season in our time in season ticket holders compared to just about anyone in the Pac-12 besides Oregon and I don't know, maybe USC.
USC sucks.
And kudos to the Oregon fan who subsequently came along. And put that trash can.
He was
back in
was
place.
very just much like. So sorry for
part of the
for us.
general conviviality.
There's
of
a story
Oregon
today
fans on
about
Saturday.
Caleb Williams wants like part ownership of whatever team is going to draft them, and it's like, I want a lot of things.
That's prohibited in the rules.
Yeah,
They really, literally came up with a rule.
Strictly prohibited, and also you're just like, dude, like you're going to be on whatever team has the first pick. Sorry. Maybe somebody will trade for it. But this idea that a college quarterback, I'm like, Caleb Williams, I don't think he's going to be a bust. He could be a bust in the NFL.
There have certainly been better college quarterbacks who have not developed into quality NFL starters.
He looks good, but like.
All right, let's talk about this Saturday's game against Arizona State. Believe it or not, after this weekend, the Huskies will have only 2 home games remaining this season, which makes me glad that I'm going to be seeing them. Wait, really? Makes me glad that I am seeing them on the road in addition to the 2 remaining
I may
home
also.
games.
We'll see.
Yeah, TBD on that one. Arizona
11-11, Utah, I'm not going to be there. And neither is Katie.
Oh, boy.
I know. It's a big one. We're going to be in LA for Flogna.
Even Baby Fantasy Genius won't be there. It's been a rough start at Arizona State for 33-year-old former Oregon offensive coordinator Kenny Dillingham, who replaced Herm Edwards as head coach. They added 33 transfers to the roster this season, but then struggled to beat FCS school Southern Utah in the season opener and have yet to beat an FBS opponent in a 1-5 start that is Arizona State's worst since World War II. The low point was a 29-0 shutout at home by Fresno State, but the Sun Devils have shown signs of progress since then, losing at Cal and to Colorado by 3 points in each of their last 2 games. That's come using 3 quarterbacks. True freshman Jaden Rashada opened the season as a starter before aggravating an injury that was expected to sideline him 4 to 6 weeks a month ago. Arizona State considering making sure that they redshirt him by playing him no more than 4 games this season. Trenton Bourget, who came off the bench against the Huskies last year to go 15 of 21 for 182 yards and 3 touchdowns and lead the upset win, which was the last loss for the Huskies, who have have won 13 consecutive games now. Started week 3 before leaving with a foot injury. Then Notre Dame transfer Drew Pine started against USC before Bourget returned to start the last 2 games, play reasonably well. Still, overall, Dillingham's specialty offense has been the Sun Devils' weakness. They rank 117th
Yikes.
in FPI offensive efficiency, 130th in special teams, and 111th overall, lowest of any opponent the Huskies have faced thus far.
Was he the Oregon offensive coordinator last year?
Yes.
I will say
Just spent 1 year there.
he spent 1 season at Oregon, and now is the head coach at Arizona State.
Yep.
Where was he beforehand?
I believe he had some experience at Florida State and maybe Auburn, if I remember.
Note to self. Become college football head coach. Like, what in the hell? Like, the amount, what he has done to get to the
Can't say
point.
the Oregon offense has really missed him much this season.
The rise of Kenny Dillingham is like meteoric, right? 1 season is the Auburn. I mean, there's some early stuff, right, from Memphis.
Was that the season they played against UW 2019? No, it
no.
wasn't. No.
2 seasons as the offensive coordinator, quarterback coach at Florida State. 1 season at Oregon. Head coach at Arizona State right after that. Welcome to 1-5, Kenny Dillingham. I was about to say, I thought that his favorite artist from the favorite artists of all college football coaches that happened, Brett McMurphy did over the summer, I thought it was Luke Combs. I had that wrong. I had that wrong in my head. And I was going to say this motherfucker only knows 1 song, and it's a Tracy Chapman cover. So I will save that for Jake Dickert.
In the Apple Cup?
In the Apple Cup. But Kenny Dillingham drops a Jupiter. I mean, Kenny, that's like classic rock when you are 33 years old.
That is true. I hadn't put that together. The Train's greatest work came when he was not even a teenager.
Yeah, no, that would be like me being like Guns N' Roses is my favorite band when I'm 33 or something. Imagine. Also, I'm not here to compare Guns N' Roses to Train.
I think
for what it's worth.
I heard you.
I don't even know who the 1980s version of Train is.
That's a separate podcast. We'll do
I'm
that
gonna think on that one.
Year end. Arizona State ranks 9th in the Pac-12 in rushing EPA. Sacramento State transfer Cam Scadaboo averaging just 3.9 yards per carry. He has been dangerous as a receiver. Only Elijah Badger has more receiving yards for Arizona State. Opponents have been better against the ASU defense in terms of EPA per rush than per pass. Thus far, Caleb Williams, the only QB to throw for at least 300 yards against the Sun Devils. You can see why he's got some demands. But USC ran for 213 yards in that game. Cal had 196 on 48 carries. The following week, they did stiffen against Colorado, allowing just 56 rushing yards and 295 total. Part of that pass defense pressure with Prince Dorba recording 6 sacks thus far. BJ Green 4. The Huskies should win this game comfortably.
I don't know. It's like I like that it's a little bit of a revenge game. I am happy that post
it is their only opportunity. Like this is it against Arizona State. I don't think they're scheduling them every other year.
Wow. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Damn, rip. This like all of these teams, it might be the last time that we play them for a long time. Wow.
Yeah, it's the last tour through the Pac-12.
I just want to let you know, Arizona State, I will not miss you.
I will not miss this. Sunny Saturdays in Tempe.
I will not be thinking about you, Arizona State.
Oh, wow.
You and Kenny Dillingham can have a lot of fun. The Huskies are going to win this 100% of the time.
100%. I don't think about you at all.
I don't know. Like, I just can't. I really can't imagine a scenario that the Huskies lose this game. I guess I'm going to knock on 100% is too
Please
common.
do.
It's like a 98%.
I'm going to say 95. I do think they're better than their FPI a little bit with Bourget at quarterback.
I'm happy that this isn't a big game the week after Oregon, because I do think, similar to how I feel and how hyped I still am about winning last week, I think that could have permeated throughout the having a couple of weeks of easier games before the schedule really, really ramps up is, I think, the right way that this is structured. It's nice to have a little break, take a breather post Oregon, reset.
Yeah. The back half of the schedule is loaded. The back third of the schedule, I guess we're currently at the halfway point, and Arizona State and Stanford are coming.
I mean, USC definitely looks like, I think we already felt like before the being demolished against Notre Dame, I think we already felt like USC's defense was going to be roasted by this UW offense. And after that happened, it's kind of just like not a doubt in my mind. So that one looks a little bit different to me. It's a road game. It's at USC. It's going to be a hard game. But
it could be a Saturday at Memorial Coliseum.
I don't think it's going to be 98 degrees. It's not going to be early October. The reality is, I think what is very likely is we'll see. Utah plays Oregon this weekend, and that'll give us a very interesting perspective about where those two teams are. I think I am cheering for Oregon in that game, but they have a much harder road, or at least short term, they have a harder road than the Huskies do. So that's going to be a fascinating one to see. We'll see what happens in that game. I think that Oregon is the best team on the schedule.
I think that Oregon is the best team on the schedule. With home field, it is not necessarily clear that hosting Oregon is the hardest game on the schedule, especially given there is an outside possibility that those two teams play again.
That makes me so terrified, by the way.
Yeah,
a neutral site. Like, I was like, if we play Oregon again, we'd better be undefeated going into that, just being guaranteed, feeling pretty close to guaranteed to making it to the college football playoff. Because I don't. Can you look up FPI? Have you already? What is national FPI after?
Well, the Huskies FPI went down at response.
What?
I forget who it was who had a much bigger win that moved ahead of them. But their chances of making the playoff are now fourth best.
I mean, Michigan is like horrifying.
I think Florida State had somehow been behind them and jumped them. But playoff percentage is 39%.
Wait, so overall rankings. Wait, I want to go through where UW and Oregon are in FPI. I thought they were higher. Oregon is still higher in FPI.
So this is the predictive version. FPI efficiency, the Huskies are number 2 in the country.
Yeah, show me the efficiency. Come on.
Michigan is number 1, then UW, then Oklahoma, and Oregon.
I mean, that Oregon team just
lurking in 10th again. Third among teams in the Pacific Northwest, but 10th in the country. Oregon State, some definite shades of the 2000 season.
Wow, God, that Beavs team. Also, Duke being that high is shocking. Georgia, low-key, pretty overrated. Nobody's saying it. But Oregon UW is second in efficiency, FBI efficiency. Oregon is fourth.
Yeah.
So, like, that was a really hard game.
It was. I agree with the assessment. Like, people kept complaining about the defense in the crowd during the game. I'm like, have you guys seen these guys play against other teams?
Yeah. No, I mean, they beat
Colorado.
Colorado.
They did this to everyone.
The margin of victory against Colorado and then beating that team is, I love to look at it. There are going to be a few of these games, right? Ohio State is playing Penn State. Oregon's playing Utah this weekend. These teams are going to start throughout the season matching up against each other, and they're going to be big ones. But so far, that is up there with the biggest wins the entire season.
Without question. On that note, we're doing you a favor.
Thanks for listening. We're doing you a favor.